So welcome to Meet the Art, Design and Architecture student panel in the virtual Monash Open Day. My name is Ross Bruin. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Architecture at MADA and a practicing architect and your host for this panel. We've also got joining us today Mia, Maddie and Francesca, students from MADA, who I'll introduce in a few moments. I would like to start this session by acknowledging country. I wish to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations on whose land many of us are gathered today, and that of course Monash is located, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. And with remote working and studying, people may be based elsewhere or interstate, so we pay our respects to the traditional owners of the land from wherever you are joining us from. And I'm in fact joining you from Hobart tonight, so the land of the Nuanona people. This panel offers some insights into what it's like to be a fine art, curating, design or architecture student at Monash. Our single degree students are primarily based at Caulfield campus amongst an active creative community of practitioners from a range of creative disciplines. Our double degree students may be between campuses, but all students have access to a variety of analogue and digital workshops, events, field trips and study tours. At the end of this roughly 20-minute session, there'll be time for some questions. So you can type your queries into the chat function, some of which will be answered by other people behind the scenes. Otherwise, we'll read some of those out at the end of the session. So to begin with, we've got some student representatives from across the faculty, and I'll start by asking them to give brief introductions of themselves to give you a glimpse of their areas of focus and their current career ambitions. So maybe I'll just pick someone to start, if that's all right. Madeline, do you want to introduce yourself to begin with?
Yeah, no worries. Well, hi, I'm Maddie, and I'm in my third and final year of the Bachelor of Fine Art degree. My practice is very multidisciplinary. It engages with many different forms of making, most frequently various forms of printmaking, but also drawing, collage, photography, and installation.
Great, thanks Madeline, and thanks for joining us this evening. Mia, do you want to go next?
Yep, sure. I'm Mia and I'm in my third and final year of a Bachelor of Spatial Design. And I'm looking forward to graduating and working within interdisciplinary design or architect practice where I can build on my knowledge and experiences for a creative and social impact.
Great, thanks Mia, and thanks for joining us as well. And Francesca.
Thanks.
Yeah, hi, I'm Francesca and I'm a fifth year student. I'm studying architecture at Monash. I undertook the undergrad at Monash as well. And I think that the course, the 5 years in total, has really given me an amazing grounding in not just architecture, but all of the other disciplines of design that can also feed into that. Yeah.
Terrific. Thanks, Francesca. So I'd like to start by asking each of you why you chose to study your particular design field. And in particular, why you chose to study at Monash. Perhaps I can go in reverse order this time. Francesca, if you want to start.
Yeah, so from what I understood when I was looking, different unis kind of can tend to specialise in different things. And what I'd heard about Monash was that it offered a course that had a bit of a number of key things. It had a strong design emphasis and some more theoretical basis, but it also had a really pragmatic side. And so I think it's great if you want a really well-rounded understanding of what architecture can offer you.
Terrific. Great, thank you. What about you, Mia?
Yeah, I chose Monash predominantly for its great facilities, such as the DFAB, which is Monash's digital fabrication lab, where you're able to access laser cutting and 3D printing, among other machinery like that, which is also great to be able to incorporate in your various projects throughout the semester. I also find the library is a great communal and central space to study and meet others if you have projects to work on together, things like that.
Great. And what about sort of your particular interest in spatial design? How did that come about?
Yeah, I quite liked the creative freedom you have to approach various projects, and also the emphasis on collaboratively working, which is emphasised right at the beginning of the course and then filters through to each year as well.
Terrific. Thanks, Mia. And Maddie, what about you? What sort of drew you to be studying fine art?
Well, I've had a passion for art for a really long time, since a young age, and I wanted to pursue the field so I could not only just like develop my skills, but see if I would want to consider it as an opportunity like for a future career. So I thought studying it would be a really good place to start. And I really liked the facilities at Monash. I was really impressed by the printmaking studios with all the machines, because I'd only ever worked with one, and then the studio spaces, which were really big, and I was just really impressed, and I thought that's where I'd come do my degree.
Terrific. And of course, art, design and architecture students are all sort of together on the Caulfield campus, sharing a lot of facilities. But I'm interested to hear from each of you what a sort of typical day might look like in studying your respective disciplines, which of course will be slightly different, even though, you know, you're sort of sharing these facilities. Mia, do you want to start perhaps with an answer to that? What is your general day when you know, in a non-COVID situation arrive at the university? How does that look and feel?
Well, if I relate it to last semester, we kind of did a hybrid learning, which worked quite well, I thought. There's about 15 or so people in our studio class and about 10 or so on Zoom who went in Melbourne. And so you go through the studio class, which is usually 3 to 4 hours, and you might have a tutor after that. And I'm someone who likes to go into uni like the whole day, like utilise the whole day. So I'd usually like go into the library between classes to do either group work or self-study.
Terrific. And what about you, Francesca? How does it sort of vary perhaps for you as an architecture student, or does that sound quite familiar?
I think that that is definitely one of the days, I suppose. There are different classes of different lengths, and the facilities at Monash really are so great. You know, we've got an amazing library. We have all these study areas. So depending on whether you're in class for half a day, or if you're in the library, or if you're making models up in F building with your mates, you have a number of different environments that you can kind of use for that.
And what about, you know, how many days a week would you typically be at uni, sort of using those studio spaces?
I mean, probably five days a week, really. I think, you know, there are also other things. There are like really nice areas to have a little break with your friends or get a coffee, or and so it's really not just a study area, it's a social place as well. And I think, yeah, you end up finding that you spend a lot of time there, both for work and just to hang out.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit that's something I've really noticed in my 13 or so years at Monash. Is just the constant improvement, particularly in the last 5 years or so, of the kind of shared facilities of the university and those kind of public spaces that stitch the various buildings together, and, you know, all the places students can hang out and, you know, basically just take it easy in between classes, which is really great.
It's great.
And what about you, Madeline? Do you find yourself sort of in the studio a fair bit as well?
Yeah, most of my days are kind of spent in and out of the studio. Normally, if we're not doing independent studio time, we would be having group critiques or individual sessions with our tutors, getting feedback, discussing work. It's very like informal in the sense that it's casual, and it like there's not much pressure like in sharing your work. It feels really open. But yeah, there's a really good like social environment, especially in the fine arts studios, where we can just all chat and like discuss work, which is really nice.
Terrific. And each of you have mentioned studios. When we talk about studios, I suppose on one hand, we're talking about the physical space in which you're doing the study, but we're also talking about the types of classes that you're undertaking. Perhaps we could just sort of break that down for the audience a little bit. In terms of the studio spaces itself, can you perhaps, or maybe Francesca, if I can put this on you to just sort of describe what that looks and feels like compared to maybe like a classroom that might be more typical to a high school student?
Yeah, the studio space is a much more, I guess, open space in a way. If you can imagine a whole bunch of classrooms together that all are able to kind of open up and collaborate together if they need to. It gives a kind of flexibility which is so valuable and important in architecture, you know, which is so based on collaboration, and you do a lot of it. So the great thing about that is that because of this openness, you see everyone else's projects and you learn so much from the other students because it's available and it's visible. It's great.
Yeah, terrific. And Mia, how would you describe then, if Francesca's sort of painted a bit of a picture of what the spaces look and feel like, in terms of then the interaction of the studio, how would you describe that perhaps to someone who's not been involved with that before?
Yeah, so particularly in the spatial design studios, it's like Francesca said, a very collaborative space and creative space, and also very welcoming. I've found because you're often presenting your work pretty regularly, like almost weekly, to your peers, and I find that that's also builds a good, strong connection with your peers, as well as like your tutors. Yeah,
great. And Maddie, you sort of mentioned critique and discussion as an integral sort of aspect of what fine arts students do, and I would also say that architecture and design students do the same. Can you break that down a little bit in sort of plain terms as to what that might mean?
Yeah. So normally what happens with us is you're assigned a tutor, which is like your mentor, and normally weekly or fortnightly, you will meet during your class time as a group with your peers and the tutor, and basically you just go through each person, and you'll go to their individual studio space and they'll present a piece of work or something they've been working on. And depending on how you structure it, it could basically go by everyone observing it first and then discussing what they think it's about, or the person presenting might say what it's about and then go from there in a discussion sort of format. And it's not really like critiques as in like you've done this badly or anything like that. It's more just like ideas, suggestions. Like it's very relaxed and it's very like constructive, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's great that you use that word there. I mean, I think ultimately the aim is always with these discussions that they're constructive about improving the work and maybe highlighting certain aspects of the project that you're going well with and others that need more attention and so on.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for each of you for sort of helping break that down a little bit. So I'm also interested to find out a little bit about what kind of work you actually produce. So what comes out of these interactions in the studios? And perhaps to help that discussion, maybe asking very directly, do you have a sort of favourite project that you've worked on in a studio setting or even in another sort of type of class, I suppose, to help the audience understand what the output of the study might look like? So maybe Mia, could you start, please?
Yeah, sure. I'd probably relate it to my studio last semester, which was called Social Spaces, which predominantly was about the interactions and how new technologies can influence these like human social interactions. So, and it's all about like the process work, I would say, which is quite like fun and exciting throughout the start of the semester, where you begin iterative hands-on model making, which later develops into unexpected outcomes, that focus on human relationships within a specific site. And what I really liked about this studio was that each of my peers had vastly different outcomes, even though we all had the same site and set of guidelines to work with.
And so what would you say you're actually producing, though, at the end of that to describe that work?
Predominantly, that was like folio work and a side with a poster and obviously a presentation.
So drawings and graphics, would you say?
And so the model making
Yep.
and then sketches, drawings, all your research, which to really build up the project and your conceptual ideas, and then the final project, and both using sketching and online, computer software drawing, like Rhino and various programs like that.
Great. And so what seems to me really interesting about what you've just said is that the process of the designing is given almost an equal weight, or it's given plenty of sort of room to breathe, and it's not just about the final outcome.
Yeah, it's great to be able to, you can shift your decisions in ways that you wouldn't realize before, and it's good to be able to just work on it week by week, the projects week by week, rather than imagining what the outcome is.
Great. And what about you, Francesca? How does it look as an architecture student in terms of the types of things that you produce in a design studio setting?
It's such a tough question because I've had so many good studios, and I've been lucky enough to have a really wide range of studios. They've all been really different. And when I say that, I mean that architecture, if you study architecture, you have the opportunity to do graphic design, model making, hand drawing, 3D modeling, with various programs. And the outcomes of those can be so varied as well. You're also really encouraged to explore something out of the box, something that maybe hasn't been done before. That's always encouraged. And so I'm not sure I can single something out. I mean, I can if you need me to, but
well, I mean, maybe I'm trying to help people visualize what it might be that they would ultimately be producing in a studio. I mean, maybe you could talk to the studio you did last semester, which I think was looking at sort of crisis architecture in response to crisis in Beirut, Lebanon. I seem to remember you produced some quite exuberant drawings at the end of that, just to be really plain, straight about it. I mean, can you describe those drawings?
Yeah. So I think, well, the drawings themselves, so I should say that the drawings that I did were of a 3D representation of a certain area in Beirut, and it was the premise of the studio, the idea that drove the studio was around thinking about their sort of crisis and various issues about that. But the drawings themselves, it involves modeling something on the computer and then taking certain drawings that you can make from those models into lines and taking that into the various art software, the Adobe suite like Illustrator, and then making a work of art that isn't just to look good, but also to express ideas, analysis, and ideas that then, are useful and not just pretty, for instance. That is very much a part of a lot of representation that we do. It involves, I think, very much like art and spatial design, analysis and having a really deep understanding of whatever it is that you're trying to investigate.
Terrific. Thanks, Francesca. And Maddie, then it's a pretty pretty broad question to ask someone studying art what it is that they produce, because it can mean lots of, well, it could be lots of different things, but maybe your particular experience and the kind of work that you do in the studio.
Yeah, normally I do produce quite a lot of printmaking outcomes because that's kind of like the medium of my preference. But I guess one of my most recent projects from last semester, which was probably my favorite, was our room installation that I did using living plant like material like vines as a sculptural object to fill the room. So I dangled and draped the vines from the walls and the bars and the structures in the ceiling to create like a chaotic mass of organic formations. And it was sort of exploring the evolving and transformation of the plant material as it deteriorated, allowing the pieces to move or fall to the ground. And it was very much a sensory experience. And the project was based a lot on intuition and as the material changed and evolved. And that was a really fun like project for me because I don't normally branch out into like installation, but that's like the good thing about fine art. I guess you can end up doing things you don't normally expect to be doing or mediums you didn't think you'd actually work in.
Yeah, great. That's a beautiful description. So what other mediums are other students working in? You discussed sort of installation, as well as obviously your own interest in printmaking, but what other areas are students exploring?
Oh, I mean, everyone's doing like a bit of everything. There's like lots of people doing photography. There's like lots of video work, painting, sculpture. Like one of my friends made these awesome big wooden blocks that are like got letters on them, and they're like massive, but she wants you to play with them. Like there's some really interesting things going on in the studios, and it's always good to just walk around and see what everyone's making.
Terrific. Sounds wonderful. Okay, well, I think we're starting to reach the end, but I think I can probably squeeze in a couple more questions. This one won't be necessarily an easy question, but it maybe opens up some unexpected answers. So what's the most surprising thing about your discipline, and what have you learnt so far? So Maddie, do you want to kick off first?
Yeah, that's kind of hard. I guess the most surprising thing was realizing like how out of the box like I could be, I guess, if like I didn't expect to be doing some of the things I did. Like in first year, I came in thinking, oh, I'm going to be a printmaker. And then the first project I made was a video work. And I've never done video work in my life. And like they encourage you to think in new ways and try new things all the time, which is like the whole fun of it. Like you might as well learn to do new things while you're here and use the facilities like that are available to you. And I guess that's probably what surprised me most.
Yeah, great. Thank you. What about you, Mia?
Mine's much like Maddie's, just like the ability to take so many different approaches to projects. And I've slowly found out like that each project, there's obviously a brief and you need to kind of follow that brief, but within a certain, to a certain extent, you can really just like take it as far as you want, while also like under the guidance of your tutors, which I thought, yeah, it's really good.
Great. And what about you, Francesca?
Yeah, similarly difficult. That's a difficult one to answer, but I would say, and also similarly, it to me was the scope of the possibilities in architecture. I had no idea, and I think if you are coming out of high school, it would be really amazing to see an architect like Kengo Kuma for the first time, or I don't know, Peter Zumthor. If anyone is interested, have a look at them. It really can open your mind both to architecture, but then backwards to art, because there is so much of architecture or art in architecture, and there's architecture in every other field. So yeah, just the scope of what you can do in it, I think.
Yeah, so it sort of sounds to me like you've all had almost like a slightly surprising encounter, that maybe what you expected the study to be, when you've actually started it, it's kind of opened up and broadened your horizons quite immensely, which is really wonderful to hear. Scott, do we need to move on? Is that why you're here?
Oh, hi, yeah. So I've popped up, loving the question and answers. You all have been amazing. But yes, I was just conscious of the time. So I thought I'd pop in and say hello to everyone out there. I'm Scott. I work in the Faculty of Art, Design and Architecture. And I've been the one that's been typing away in the Q&A section. So we might get to some of those questions.
Yeah, great. So do I just start at the top, or how do we do this?
Yeah. We've had a few interesting ones come in, especially about the sense of community and collaboration and how that's been impacted by what COVID is, or the new COVID normal, especially around access to facilities and shows and those kind of things. And just as a general overview, I'll let you know that the university follows the Victorian government directions. So as the government begins to ease and be able to bring people back on campus, the university follows in suit, with the primary objective of making sure that staff and students are kept in a safe environment while being able to get the best learning they can under these situations. But Ross, I might throw it open to the students. Like, how have you found the challenges of COVID and coming and work, and the balance between working online and coming on campus when it's been available? Maybe Francesca?
Yeah, I can start. I think one of the things that has been to me the most valuable thing of almost anything to come out of studying architecture at Monash is that you become a resourceful person and a problem solver. And I think that if you can treat even something as horrible as this as just an opportunity, it would help you, in what you're studying. It will help you later in your career. And so, yeah, I guess that's what I did. And I think that I got that wish to treat problems that way from studying architecture.
Fantastic response. And I think what you were talking about before about problem solving is absolutely imperative, because I think the World Economic Forum put creative thinking, design thinking, problem solving as the top assets or skills and qualities that employers are looking for over the next 5 years. So it definitely keeps you in a paramount position. But Maddie, I might ask you as well, because a lot of the questions have been coming through with a fine art theme. So how have you found the balance, especially because, all of our programs in art, design and architecture are very hands-on?
I mean, it didn't ruin our spirit too much. We were pretty adaptable. Last year, I mean, because we couldn't show off our work in person last year, we ended up making class zine, which is like an art magazine for our cohort, and we all got to work on that together. It was really fun to design it, work together on it, like build a website and Instagram for it, and so that ended up being a really collaborative thing we could do as a group together, and a good way for us to show our work. I mean, facility wise, last year everyone was really good. Like, I had a printmaking elective, which you'd think you wouldn't be able to do without a workshop, but they sent us all the equipment so we could do it from home. They had like videos to help us teach us how to do it, because there was no one there to teach us in person. Yeah, and this year, everything's been a bit on and off, but we typically get to still go in and use the facilities, which has been really good.
Great. We've got another question here, which actually is specific to architecture, from Olivia. Interested to know what computer software we mainly use and teach. Francesca, do you want to have a stab at that?
Yeah, so we mainly use Rhinoceros, and all the affiliated, there are Grasshopper and other plugins that could be used with that program to create interesting forms. But we also start in first year learning another program, AutoCAD, sorry. So they're the two main sort of drawing programs. And then on top of that, we use the Adobe suite. So Photoshop, Illustrator, also Acrobat, and a number of other programs in design. Yeah, generally speaking.
Great. Okay, what else have we got here? Some more fine art questions.
Yeah, popular tonight, fine art. There was one in there about the diversity of
is there much
range.
diversity in age range among students? I'd be a mature age applicant and just want to get a sense if there'd be others. What's your experience with that, Maddie?
Yeah, I think I found that there is a reasonable like diversity. There is definitely a few like mature age students, and then people in between as well. So you get like a broad range of people in fine art.
That's certainly been my experience as well as a staff member. That's what I've noticed over the years. Again, a broad range of different ages and genders and you name it. So yeah, certainly pretty evident, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's a nice mix and works well together, because I know when I was at uni, we had quite a number of mature age students in my course, and I found that my marks increased just because I became more competitive and you were listening and you just had a depth of knowledge and life experience that they brought in to the conversation, which I found fantastic. So yeah, so I was wrapped. I started, getting distinctions, high distinctions. I was like, yes.
Terrific. What else have we got here? Any tips for an application folio? Did you have to do one of those, Maddie?
Yeah, I did. Folios, yeah, application folios are a little bit daunting, I must admit. I was pretty scared, but I would just recommend putting in as much work as you can, like even if it's just like a sketch that you don't think is that good, probably best to just have more work to show is always better. And I guess being comfortable talking about your work, I think that was the hardest part for me, but if you're good at talking about it, then that will make life easier.
Yeah, and they've sort of changed the folio application process a little bit now, so it's all digital. So they just ask you to submit like 10 to 15 pieces of work. You can draw that from your 10, 11 and 12. And there's also a 300-word statement. That's where you just sort of get to chat a bit why you want to do fine art, and then what you love about art. And it's really just a way for our fine art academics to get to know you a little bit better and for you to get to know us. So, but the other good thing is that design and architecture are ATAR based only. So there's no folio or interviews or design tests for those programs, which is quite good.
We've got a question from Zadzia saying, particularly for fine art, is there a starting point for the artwork, or are you left to come up to the student? I think what that's saying is it something you're just expected to come up with by yourself? Yeah. Or are you given certain prompts? Is that maybe the question? I think we'll have to assume that's the way it is.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks, Azia. It's good that you're listening.
I mean, I think everyone in first year, they're definitely really helpful. All of the main projects for studio, like your core studio class, start off with like a prompt and a theme sort of. It's very broad, like you can be very open with it, but that's kind of helps you to get started with making the work. And normally each week they would set like a task, which will also help you along in developing your idea. So you're not kind of left stranded on your own. I guess by third year, you're sort of supposed to sort of be coming up with it on your own, because by then you would have developed your ideas a bit more, but they definitely help you along in first year.
Great. Hopefully that answers your questions, Adzia. I think we've reached the end of the list. Am I correct, Scott? Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Looks like we've gone through them. Thank you, everyone, for those questions.
So thanks, particularly Maddie there, for taking the lion's share of the questions, but thanks each of you, of course, for sharing your experiences of studying at Monash and coming in to do that in the evening and sharing that with our wonderful audience today. So thanks again for attending, and hopefully we'll see many of you at Monash in the coming years.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.